Well, how very European, a kissing campaign to keep the UK in the EU. Now, with the Brexit referendum just 3 days away, we ask British businesses, are you in or out? We're also in Nigeria, and the currency U-turn in Africa's biggest economy, the government hopes could change its fortunes. And still going strong at 80, the South Koreans who refuse to retire. I'm Matthew Moore in Istanbul, and this is Money Talks. Now, with just 3 days until the UK's Brexit referendum, the latest opinion polls suggest people are leaning towards staying in the EU. Well, thanks to that news, European stocks rose, so did Asian stocks, and so did the British pound. But with the vote still too close to call, a pro-European group organised this kissing campaign in Rome, Paris and Berlin to demonstrate their love for Britain. Their big message, don't leave the EU. But all emotion aside, what do British businesses think? Well, we sent Azar Sukri to meet an importer and a big name in the British beer business.
The UK was not part of the original European plan when its outline was first sketched in the 1950s. But since it became a member in 1973, companies like this importer of pens, pencils and other stationery have grown. JCar International is a small company that's benefited from the low cost of transporting goods from across the continent. And its managing director says a vote to leave the EU would spell enormous problems.
We're buying from Italy, Germany, France, Spain, and there are no trade barriers, no duties, and it's easy to get goods in. There's a tremendous volume coming in from Europe, and if volumes are reduced, costs could go up, which is of great worry to us.
A survey by the Confederation of British Industries in 2013 showed that nearly 3/4 of its members believe that EU membership has had a positive impact on their businesses. They believe that the biggest advantage to being a member is access to the EU's market of 500 million people, which is worth nearly $17 trillion a year. For companies like JCar International, staying in Europe is of crucial importance. The Leave campaigners say, though, that other companies would benefit immensely by being outside of the European Union. JD Wetherspoon operates around 1,000 pubs as well as hotels and restaurants. It employs nearly 40,000 people. Its chairman is a vocal advocate of leaving the EU.
I think the country would pay less tax. We pay £350 million a week to the EU, and that will help Wetherspoon because we're a very, very big taxpayer. There'll be less regulations about building coming out of the ether, about employment. It's quite an autocratic institution now, the EU.
A major argument by the Leave camp is that the UK does not need Europe. They say the UK's exports to the rest of the world are growing twice as fast as those to the continent. And they say leaving the EU would give the UK freedom to negotiate its own free trade deals, independent of decisions made in Brussels. These factors, they say, would mean lower costs and more opportunities for UK enterprises. If the UK chooses to leave Europe, it would be a decision that could not be undone, and the costs or benefits of doing so may not be known for many years. Azar Sukri, TRT World, London.
Well, Vicky Pryce is an economist and the former joint head of the United Kingdom's Government Economic Service, and she joins me now from London. Vicky, thank you so much for joining us on Money Talks. We've heard from you before in our reports, and you're certainly in favour of Britain remaining in the EU. We heard from the head of JD Wetherspoons in our report that he and his company would save hundreds of millions of dollars every year if the United Kingdom left the EU. Do you have any sympathy for that at all?
Well, it's entirely possible that there are some issues that concern particular companies where the European Union may have been a bit of a problem for them. But the vast majority of firms, if you look at any of the surveys that have been done, whether it's from the Confederation of British Industry, the British Chambers of Commerce, the Institute of Directors, they all say that they want to stay, even in a non-reformed Europe. And that is because, of course, they have access to such a big market, and there are very few transaction costs in dealing with them. And, of course, they perceive that there will be a serious loss in terms of foreign direct investment coming and investing into the UK.
Britain is a net contributor to the EU, so doesn't it make sense that they were putting more in than they take out? So doesn't it make sense that if they left, they would actually be saving money?
Oh, it is absolutely true that there is a net payment that we make every year. Of course, we get an awful lot of the gross amount back. But that payment, of course, could disappear in terms of the benefit that it might give us if we kept it very, very quickly if there was any slowdown in the economy. We're talking about no more net than £10 billion a year that we contribute to the budget, which, of course, is used for all sorts of reasons, including improving the economic conditions of various countries in Europe, which then, of course, become buyers of our own goods. So we've got to bear in mind that this is actually a very positive contribution that we make.
OK, we also heard the head of JD Wetherspoons there complaining that the EU is an autocratic body, and Michael Howard, the former Tory party leader and a Leave campaign figure, had this to say about the European Union.
The common market has changed. What was then a common market with very limited jurisdiction is now a European Union which has become a political entity, much more concerned with political matters than with economic matters. And I'm very unhappy with the fact that our Parliament and our Supreme Court are now subordinate to the European Court of Justice and to the European Commission.
It seems that the United Kingdom, a number of campaigners there, arguing not only on economic but on democratic grounds. Do you have any sympathy for that?
Well, I have to say I have debated against both the gentleman you mentioned before. And, of course, you can be worried about the way in which Europe is moving. We have, of course, got a complete opt-out of ever closer union. The reality is that it is still very much an economic union. The benefits we get out of dealing with all those countries in Europe, including actually those of the Eurozone, which are now beginning to really pick up, is an absolutely sort of positive one for us. And losing that just in order to get a little bit of sovereignty back, which at present is completely undefined, seems to me not to make economic sense.
OK, Vicky Pryce in London, thank you very much for your analysis. Well, the world's eyes will be on the UK for the whole of this week, undoubtedly. But millions of Britons living in Europe are also finding themselves on the outside looking in. Most of those live in Spain, and they don't want to leave.
If you're on a ship and something's going wrong, you try to sort out what's going wrong with the ship. You don't just jump off.
Surely it's better to get out while you can and get the only lifeboat rather than staying on board with the rest of the crew and passengers.
Well, let's look at this more closely now. The flip side with Craig Capitas, who joins us from Paris. Craig, it seems that the British there in those sound bites wanted to compare the European Union to a sinking ship. What do you make of that metaphor?
Well, yeah, we have competing metaphors, competing realities. Matthew, the only real reality here is chaos, confusion, and crisis. These are the only three certainties that are going to emerge from the United Kingdom divorcing the European Union. And forget about the retirees down there. The big issue which everyone avoids in these discussions is youth unemployment. We right now have 4.5 million young people out of work in the EU, with peaks of more than 40% in some member states. So what happens to the more than 3 million EU member state citizens, mostly young people, currently living and working in the UK because there are no jobs for them in their home country? Nobody knows.
OK, it's a very interesting question, because it seems very few people in the mainstream of the campaigns are suggesting a mass deportation of Europeans if there were a Brexit, but it's still left uncertain and open as a question.
Well, Matthew, let me throw one other statistic into this, our day's report full of statistics. There are close to 14 million European Union citizens live in a member state other than their country of citizenship. That's a huge number. And in or out, Brexit has laid bare the worrisome truth that Europe is a union of debtor nations and creditor nations, filled with young people in search of non-existent jobs and angry with their own governments, the bureaucrats in Brussels, and to hear some tell it, the Germans as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting because the uncertainty, of course, around this process has led to a surge in applications for British citizenship because people are worried that somewhere down the line they could actually be thrown out. So do you think this referendum, whatever the outcome, will encourage other countries to look at getting out as well?
Yeah, well, all of the polls suggest that, and a lot of the talk we're hearing from other European country leaders is saying that Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán blames Germany for this problem and condemns Berlin's ham-fisted control of the EU as moral imperialism, is what he calls it. Now, if you talk to people on the street, young people on the street, they don't care what Mike Howard is talking about. They don't care about what our other two guests were talking about. They are looking for jobs. In or out, the EU has failed, and their member states have failed to create a situation that gives young people jobs. It's as simple as that and as complicated as that.
All right, Craig Capitas with the flip side there in Paris. Thank you. Well, Money Talks will be looking at all the angles, economic and political, in the lead up to Thursday's referendum. Be sure to join us for that. We'll have in-depth analysis and reaction to the vote on Friday. That's Money Talks at 17:30 GMT here on TRT World. Okay, now let's go around the world in 60 seconds for the top business headlines. No increase in public spending for the next 20 years. That's the fix for Brazil's ailing economy, according to its finance minister, Henrique Meirelles. Unlike the recently ousted president, Dilma Rousseff, Mr. Meirelles insists Brazil's current crisis is due to domestic mismanagement of government resources. The widely respected head of the Indian Central Bank is stepping down, following political pressure from the government. Raghuram Rajav was facing criticism for keeping interest rates high. The former IMF economist was credited with predicting the 2008 global financial crisis and bringing stability to India since his appointment in 2013. And Toyota will spend $1 billion on artificial intelligence over the next 5 years. The motor company says it wants to use technology to deliver driver assistance systems. The push comes at a time when most major auto companies are racing towards assisted driving and driverless vehicles. Well, plenty more coming up after the break on Money Talks. We're in Lagos in Nigeria, where the government's now allowing the currency to trade freely. The future of 3D printing, how to make a skull and other human parts. And the 80-year-old couriers in Seoul, why it's never too late for a new career.